All right, so let's start with the revision of the cells, the building blocks of life. This is your chapter number 2. Chapter number 1 हमने अभी दोबारा किया था, in which we talked about the characteristics of living organisms. Now we're going to talk about cells, the building blocks of life. What are the different types of cells, animal plant cells, the differences between them, how they look under the microscope, then the comparison between animal and plant cell, the cell surface membrane, what are the different levels of organization as well. All of those things are actually important. So you should know that a cell is a basic unit of life and it consists of a mass of living matter called protoplasm. Protoplasm is everything. Protoplasm क्या क्या होता है? Let's say if this is a cell, except the cell wall, जो कुछ अंदर है बाकी चीजें, जिसमें आपके पास वैक्यूल भी आ रहा है, आपके पास ऑर्गेनेल्स भी आ रहे हैं, everything else that is in there in the cell is known as protoplasm, which is a jelly-like substance in which endless chemical activities are carried out to ensure the life of a cell. Even cytoplasm is a part of protoplasm. साइटोप्लाज्म भी प्रोटोप्लाज्म के अंदर होता है. प्रोटोप्लाज्म के अंदर सारे ऑर्गेनेल्स भी हैं, ऑल डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनेल्स, कंपाउंड्स दैट आर अरेंज्ड इन एन ऑर्डरली मैनर. 70 to 90% of the protoplasm of the cell is water, and the rest of it consists of mineral salts and organic compounds such as carbohydrates, fats, proteins. And plus, if it's a mixture, its composition also varies from plant to plant and from animal to animal. The protoplasm of these cells that make up one part of our body may be different from that of cells found in another part of our body as well. हर मसल सेल फर्क होगा, कार्डियक सेल्स फर्क होंगे, ठीक है, आपके एपिथेलियल सेल्स फर्क होंगे, सिलिएटेड सेल्स फर्क होंगे, ब्रेन सेल्स फर्क होंगे, स्टेम सेल्स फर्क होंगे, बट द बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर is gonna be the same for all the animal cells that you actually see. We have the cell surface membrane, nucleus के अंदर you have nuclear envelope, chromatin, nucleus. Then we have a pair of centrioles for cell division, mitochondria for energy, cytoplasm, the gel-like substance, vacuole for storage, and protoplasm दो states में exist करता है, सॉलिड स्टेट और जेल स्टेट. ठीक है, सॉलिड स्टेट क्या होता है? कंप्लीटली लिक्विड स्टेट, जब बहुत ज्यादा वाटर हाई हो सेल के अंदर. जेल स्टेट जब सेमी सॉलिड स्टेट हो, आधा solid or other liquid, it should be a mixture that resembles the consistency of a jelly. Whether the protoplasm is in the sol or gel state depends on the physiological state of the cell. Though scientists know the various compounds that make up the protoplasm, no one has been able to prepare a mixture which can really be called a protoplasm. This is due to the following limitations, and the exact nature of the protoplasm is still unknown. It is very complex, and we do not as yet fully understand all the details of its organization. So far, we have not been able to reproduce the environmental conditions under which the life can actually originate. तो मेनली जो प्रोटोप्लाज्म है ना, उसमें तीन पार्ट्स जिनका बहुत ज्यादा आता है सिलेबस में, दैट इज न्यूक्लियस, द साइटोप्लाज्म इट हैज ऑल द अदर ऑर्गेनेल्स, एंड द सेल सरफेस मेम्ब्रेन. न्यूक्लियस एक स्मॉल स्फेरिकल मास है ऑफ अ डेंसर प्रोटोप्लाज्म. न्यूक्लियस का जो साइटोप्लाज्म होता है, इट इज नोन एज योर न्यूक्लियर प्लाज्म सराउंडेड बाय मेम्ब्रेन कॉल्ड एज न्यूक्लियर एनवेलप. इट इज आल्सो एम्बेडेड विद इन द साइटोप्लाज्म, और ये इसके पास बहुत एक पूरा नेटवर्क होता है ऑफ क्रोमैटिन. न्यूक्लियस के अंदर एक न्यूक्लियोलस है, प्लस इट हैज अ डेंस coiled structure, a network of chromatin. The chromatin threads contain hereditary materials, materials which was inherited from the parents, and these materials control the activities of the cell. During cell division, the chromatin threads condense and become highly coiled structures called the chromosomes. Under the microscope, the chromosomes appear as thick rod-shaped structures. Spherical structures called the nucleoli, and each nucleolus play a part in building up of the protein as well. A nuclear envelope which separates the nuclear content from the cytoplasm, वो उस nuclear membrane का नाम ही nuclear envelope है. Every organelle also has a membrane. The nucleus is responsible for cell reproduction, and it is also needed for the continued life of the cell, as well as for the repair of the worn out parts. Cells without a nucleus, for example, the red blood cells of a mammal, have a very short lifespan and they are unable to reproduce as well. When we discuss about cytoplasm, cytoplasm is all that jelly-like fluid that is inside the साइटोप्लाज्म, ठीक है। साइटोप्लाज्म, प्रोटोप्लाज्म, ये पूरा एक जेल लाइक सब्सटेंस होता है। एंड ऑल द ऑर्गेनेल्स, ऑल द रिएक्शंस अकर ओवर हियर एज वेल। सारे ऑर्गेनेल्स भी इधर ही प्रेजेंट है, और जितने रिएक्शंस होने हैं हर ऑर्गेनेल के अंदर, इवन इफ इट्स फोटोसिंथेसिस, माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया, हार्मोनल, एंजाइमिक एक्टिविटीज हैं, दे आर ऑल गोइंग टू टेक प्लेस विद इन द साइटोप्लाज्म। एंड इट यूजुअली फॉर्म्स द लार्जर पार्ट ऑफ द सेल, एंड इट इज द प्लेस वेयर मोस्ट ऑफ द लाइफ प्रोसेसेस अकर। Embedded in the cytoplasm are some very important organelles as well. जैसे कि we have rod-shaped organelles, mitochondria, which are involved in the release of energy from food substances during cell respiration, और वो ATP रिलीज करते हैं। This is one of the functions of mitochondria. As a battery, आप कह लो सेल चलाने की बैटरी है। When needed, ये ATP molecules आप कभी ब्रेक डाउन कर सकते हो, and those ATP molecules are going to release energy. तो माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया प्रोड्यूस करते हैं एटीपी, और बॉडी में अब आप एटीपी को कहीं भी तोड़ो तो वो एनर्जी रिलीज करके दे देगा। एंड यू डू नीड एनर्जी फॉर अ लॉट ऑफ vital activities such as growth and reproduction and all of these. So here you can see a typical structure of an animal cell as well. It has a nucleus. Then we have a tonoplast, which is this membrane of the vacuole. आपके पास रॉड शेप माइटोकॉन्ड्रिया है फॉर एनर्जी। अ सेल वॉल इज प्रेजेंट, एग्जैक्टली ये इंपॉर्टेंट है, जो कि सिर्फ प्लांट सेल्स में होता है, एनिमल्स में नहीं होता। We have the cytoplasm as well, a large central vacuole. Then we also have the chloroplast. Chloroplast भी सिर्फ animal cells में होते हैं, sorry, सिर्फ plant cells में होते हैं. They are not there in the animal cells because only plants carry out photosynthesis. Many other organelles such as chloroplast are also present, which where the plants make their food through photosynthesis, combining together carbon dioxide and water. कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड और वाटर को कंबाइन करके दे प्रोड्यूस ग्लूकोज एंड ऑक्सीजन। अब कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड इनको हमसे आती है, वी एक्सेल कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड, एंड वाटर दे अब्सॉर्ब फ्रॉम द रूट्स। दे कंबाइन इट बाय यूजिंग द हेल्प फ्रॉम सनलाइट टू मेक शुगर विच इज ग्लूकोज। वैक्यूल्स भी एक ऑर्गेनेल है विच इज अ फ्लूइड फिल्ड स्पेस enclosed by a membrane. Animal cells may have many small vacuoles, but they are usually not permanent. वैक्यूल्स एनिमल सेल्स के अंदर भी होते हैं, बट दे आर वेरी स्मॉल एंड वेरी न्यूमरस। जबकि प्लांट सेल्स के अंदर एक ही लार्ज परमानेंट वैक्यूल होता है, और ये परमानेंट है। एनिमल सेल्स के टेम्पररी वेसिकल्स होते हैं बेसिकली। A plant cell usually has a large central vacuole which contains a liquid called the cell sap. Cell sap contains dissolved substances such as sugars, mineral salts, amino acids, and this large vacuole is enclosed by a membrane called the tonoplast. A pair of tiny structures also close to the nucleus known as centrioles, जिनका पार्ट सिर्फ सेल डिवीजन में होता है, और हम वो आगे पढ़ेंगे। मोर ओवर, सेल वॉल के अंदर ही आपके पास होती है सेल मेम्ब्रेन। इफ यू टॉक अबाउट एनिमल सेल्स, एनिमल सेल्स में तो आउटर मोस्ट लेयर ही क्या है, सेल मेम्ब्रेन। बट इन अ प्लांट सेल, प्लांट सेल के अंदर आपके पास पहले सेल वॉल आती है, और फिर सेकेंड मोस्ट जो इनर मोस्ट लेयर है, दैट इज द सेल मेम्ब्रेन। इट इज ऑल्सो नोन एज द प्लाज्मा मेम्ब्रेन, और इसको हम पार्शली परमेबल या फिर सिलेक्टिवली परमेबल मेम्ब्रेन का भी नाम देते हैं, विच कंट्रोल्स द सब्सटेंसेज एंटरिंग और लीविंग द सेल। Similar membranes may also surround large spaces or vacuoles within the cell, and in a plant cell, there is a cell wall which encloses the whole cell. This cell wall is made up of cellulose, and it protects the cell from injury as well. प्लस हर चीज कंट्रोल कर दे, कौन सी चीज अंदर आएगी, कौन सी चीज बाहर जाएगी, इट इज ऑल कंट्रोल्ड बाय द सेल मेम्ब्रेन एज वेल। सो ग्रोथ क्या है, ठीक है। नाउ ये तो सारे बेसिक सेल्स हो गए, और हमने इनके डिफरेंट सेल ऑर्गेनेल्स सारी डिटेल पढ़ ली है। एंड वी हैव आल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट द डिफरेंट स्पेशलाइज्ड सेल्स, टिश्यूज, ऑर्गन्स एंड सिस्टम्स। अब ये सारे सेल्स ना स्पेशलाइज्ड होते हैं टू स्पेसिफिक फंक्शन। जैसे प्लांट सेल्स हैं, प्लांट सेल तो एक टिपिकल प्लांट सेल है, ये स्पेशलाइज होता है एक रूट हेयर सेल के अंदर भी। ये स्पेशलाइज हो सकता है एक जाइलम वेसल के सेल में भी। ये स्पेशलाइज होगा आपका पेलिसेड मेसोफिल सेल बनाने में भी, ये स्पॉन्जी मेसोफिल सेल भी बनाएगा। इसी तरह जो एनिमल सेल्स होते हैं, दे आर ऑल्सो स्पेशलाइज्ड इनटू मेनी टाइप, जैसे कि स्पर्म सेल during reproduction, we have the egg cell, ठीक है। egg cell is a specialized form. We have the ciliated cell with the hairs, ठीक है। we have the red blood cells, वो भी specialized है। तो growth is an organism that involves cell division, and new cells are produced, and they may change and develop into new tissues as well. This process of change is also known as differentiation. There are many different types of cells in organisms, and they differ in the size and shape, and they are all adapted to perform specific functions as well. Let me show you how they are adopted and in different functions. First, let's look at this. The difference between animals and plant cells, and in detail the whole structure of a plant cells as well. Let me show you one thing. Okay.
If you had to think back about the most exciting day you ever had in a science classroom, which day would that be? Now, looking back through the years, we have a few. The time we participated in an earthworm dissection, the time we took apart an owl pellet, the osmosis eggs, all of the fruit flies and genetic experiments. Oh, I could go on, but I will never forget one day in my 9th grade science class. My teacher brought in pond water, and I put one drop of pond water on a microscope slide and saw the most amazing thing ever. I saw an amoeba. A single-celled amoeba on that microscope slide, and I was forever stuck on science from that point on. Because I could not believe that this little cell was there, alive on this slide, still eating, because that's what amoebas do a lot. But to imagine that every person is actually made of billions of cells. Of course, not amoeba cells, but animal cells. Billions of animal cells. That's fascinating. In fact, it really makes you reflect on some of the incredible statements of the modern cell theory. The modern cell theory includes the following. First, that the cell is the smallest living unit in all organisms. And second, that all living things are made of cells, one or more cells. The amoeba I observed was a single-celled organism, so unicellular. Humans are made of many cells, so multicellular. And third, all cells come from other pre-existing cells. You know, cells have their own little world inside them. They carry genetic information, they can divide, many have functions and processes that their organelles, structures inside them, can take care of. On our planet, we can divide cells into two major groups. As a cell, you're either a prokaryote or a eukaryote. Bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes, but everything else, plants, animals, fungi, protists, are eukaryotes. Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have genetic material. Both have cytoplasm. Both have ribosomes, which are small organelles that make protein. Both have cell membranes, which control what goes in and out of the cell. But what makes them different is a big deal. Prokaryote, the pro rhymes with no, and they have no nucleus, which holds the genetic material and controls the cell's activities. Prokaryotes have no membrane-bound organelles. Membrane-bound organelles are fancy organelles like the nucleus and mitochondria and Golgi apparatus. Eukaryotes, the U rhymes with do, they do have membrane-bound organelles. So now you may be wondering, well, what do the organelles do? What are their functions? Well, you know our style. We love our science with a side of comics. So we want to take you on a tour of the ride of your life, into the inside of a cell. Now, to start our trip, we're going to have to get through this cell membrane, also called a plasma membrane. It's selectively permeable, which means that it only lets certain select materials in and out. But by doing so, it keeps things in the cell stable, also known as keeping homeostasis. And we have an entire video on just the membrane itself, which is found in all cells. But for now, we're just going to have to squeeze through this protein in the membrane. Now, inside the cell, we find ourselves in this jelly-like material called cytoplasm. It surrounds all these internal cell structures, and you'll find it inside both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Now, organelles that are floating around in the cytoplasm can have more support than you might think. Cells contain a cytoskeleton, which is a collection of fibers that can provide support for the cell and its organelles. And the cytoskeleton can even play a major role in cell movement. The cytoskeleton actually deserves its own video because it's very complex and its organization can vary depending on what kind of cell you're looking at. Moving through the cytoplasm, let's start with ribosomes. They are not membrane-bound organelles, and they're going to be in both prokaryotes and eukaryotes. They make protein, which is really important because that's what so much of genetic material, DNA, codes for, protein. Ribosomes can be free in the cytoplasm, but they can be attached to another organelle too, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We're now going to focus on organelles that will be membrane bound. So we're going to be focusing on organelles that you would find in a eukaryote cell. This takes our travel to the big boss, the nucleus. Now in eukaryotes, it holds the genetic material. Genetic material as in DNA, for example. Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes have DNA, but if you're a eukaryote, you have a nucleus to put it in. And the nucleus controls the cell's activities, and inside it, it has a nucleolus, which is where ribosomes can be produced. Attached to the membrane of the nucleus, or nuclear membrane, you will find the endoplasmic reticulum, ER for short. It does a lot of processing of molecules for the cell, like protein folding, and it's highly involved in actually transporting those molecules around, like a highway. There's a rough ER, which has ribosomes attached to it, making it, as you can imagine, rough, and then smooth ER, which doesn't have the ribosomes. Rough ER specifically tends to be involved with protein producing and transporting, because remember that ribosomes make protein. Now, molecules that leave the ER can be sent away in vesicles that actually pinch off the ER themselves. Now, smooth ER has many additional roles, including detoxification, which is one reason why your liver cells tend to have a lot of smooth ER. And another additional role of smooth ER is that it can make some types of lipids. Next, the Golgi apparatus. It's the ultimate packaging center. It can receive items from the transport vesicles that pinched off the ER. It has enzymes that can modify molecules it may receive and sorts the material it receives as well. It can determine where to send those molecules, including some that may eventually be sent to the membrane, so they can be secreted, which means items that can be sent out of the cell. So with all that's going on in here, you might start to wonder, what's powering this thing? The mighty mitochondria, or mitochondrion, if you're just talking about one. They're like power plants. The mitochondria make ATP energy in a process called cellular respiration. Now, it's not the type of power plant that you might think of. It runs on glucose, which is a sugar, and it needs the presence of oxygen to efficiently make ATP energy. Now, at this point, we need to mention that eukaryotes are not a one-size-fits-all. Animal cells can have differences from plant cells. We have a fork in the road here. For example, plant cells not only have mitochondria, but they can also have these awesome organelles called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts actually make glucose by using light energy in a process known as photosynthesis. They tend to even have a green look to them because they have a pigment that captures the light energy and it reflects green light. Now, both plant and animal cells can have vacuoles. Now, vacuoles can have a lot of different functions, but many types act as storage of materials. Plant cells can have one large vacuole called a central vacuole, while animal cells can have smaller several vacuoles. Now, remember how we already said that all cells have membranes? They do. But plant cells additionally can have a cell wall, which is a layer that offers additional protection and shape maintenance that animal cells do not. Okay, now how do we get out of this animal cell that we've been in? Well, we could get out like a protein would. So if we were a protein, we would only be made because of instructions from DNA. And remember that in eukaryotes, DNA is found in the nucleus. We would be made by a ribosome because ribosomes make protein. The ribosomes could be attached to the rough ER, and the rough ER highway would provide a vesicle to send us to the Golgi apparatus where sorting can take place. And if we're tagged for being secreted, we could be sent off through a vesicle from the Golgi to the membrane. Out we go! Now just keep in mind that in our quick tour, there are still so many more awesome organelles found in lots of different types of eukaryote cells to continue exploring, so to the Google for more. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters.
So this was a whole summary of the very major organelles that are a part of your animal and plant cells as well. और अब आगे अगर हम बात करें, जैसे मैंने बताया, there are many animals and plant cells which have differentiated into many types as well. तो सबसे पहले जो हम एक plant cell देखेंगे, that is the root hair cell. अब ये किस तरह से स्पेशलाइज है, सब कुछ वही है सिवाय ये चीज के. ये चीज उसकी जब निकली है वो स्पेशलाइज हो गया है. Because being long and narrow, the root hair increases the surface area to volume ratio, of the cell for efficient absorption of water and mineral salts from the soil. हाँ जी, गोल्जी एपरेटस और साइटोस्केलेटन आपके सिलेबस में नहीं है, इट्स जस्ट फॉर लेबलिंग। ठीक है, बिल्कुल वो सिलेबस में नहीं है। Then we have the red blood cells. The red blood cell contains a red pigment called the hemoglobin, which enables the cell to transport oxygen from the lungs to all parts of the body. Its circular biconcave shape increases surface area. अब इसकी क्या एक स्पेशलिटी है कि ये एम्प्टी है, इसमें कोई ऑर्गेनेल्स नहीं है, ताकि मैक्सिमम ऑक्सीजन रेड ब्लड सेल्स के अंदर आ सके। और रूट हेयर सेल की क्या स्पेशलाइजेशन थी, दैट इट हैज अ मैक्सिमम सरफेस एरिया टू एब्जॉर्ब वाटर एंड मिनरल सॉल्ट्स। As a result, oxygen can now diffuse into and out of the whole cell at a faster rate. Then we have xylem vessels. Xylem vessel, another plant cell. Xylem vessels transport water and mineral salts from the roots to the stems and leaves. Absence of cross walls and protoplasm enables the water to move easily through the lumen. Lignin strengthens the walls and prevent the collapse of the vessel. And when bundled together, the xylem vessels provide mechanical support to the plant as well. उसके अलावा रूट हेयर सेल इज अ स्पेशलाइज्ड प्लांट सेल, रेड ब्लड सेल स्पेशलाइज्ड एनिमल सेल, जाइलम वेसल्स के अंदर टिफ टफ लिग्निन लगा होता है, जिसकी वजह से वो स्पेशलाइज आपके पास हो जाते हैं। नेक्स्ट वी हैव टिश्यूज, ऑर्गन्स एंड सिस्टम्स। अभी मैं आपको दो और लेक्चर्स आज भेजूंगा जो आप लोगों ने देखने हैं। पहले आप लोगों ने आई होप देख लिए होंगे। द फर्स्ट वन वाज कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म, द सेकंड वाज वैरायटी। अब जो अगले दो लेक्चर्स आएंगे, वन ऑफ देम इज नेम्ड सेल्स, ठीक है, और दूसरा है लेवल्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। लेवल्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, लेवल्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ही ये चीज है कि हाउ इज द लेवल ऑर्गेनाइज। देखिए, इट ऑल स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम एन एटम। एटम्स मेक व्हाट? मॉलिक्यूल्स। मॉलिक्यूल्स मेक ऑर्गेनेल्स। ऑर्गेनेल्स मेक सेल्स। सेल्स बनाते हैं टिश्यूज। टिश्यूज आपके पास बनाएंगे organs. Organs are going to make organ systems, and organ system would make a whole complete organism. This is the level of organization. A multicellular organism is made up of many cells. A human body is made up of 60,000 billion cells, and there are many different types of cells varying in size and shape. Different types of cell do different work, and cell of the same type may be grouped together to carry out a special function. Such a group of cells performing a special function is called a simple tissue, and an example of a simple tissue is the epithelial tissue or the epithelium. This is a sheet of cells which cover both the internal and external surfaces of the body. Plants have a similar covering tissue called the epidermis, and the epidermis of leaves and stems is another example of a simple tissue as well. यही सारे टिश्यूज मिलके फिर सारे जब कनेक्ट करते हैं, दे मेक अ होल ऑर्गन। एंड जैसे कि ये एपिथेलियल टिश्यू एक कॉम्प्लेक्स टिश्यू है, ये मिलके मसल्स ही बना रहे हैं, ये मिलके आपके किडनीज ही बना रहे हैं, आपके कार्डियक मसल सेल्स बना रहा है। ये डिफरेंट सेल्स होते हैं, दे कंबाइन टिश्यूज, और टिश्यूज मिलके ग्लैंडुलर टिश्यूज होते हैं, नर्वस टिश्यू होते हैं, बोन टिश्यूज होंगे, एंड दीज डिफरेंट टिश्यूज में बी यूनाइटेड टू फॉर्म एन ऑर्गन। जैसे कि स्टमक हो गया, लिवर हो गया। An organ is a group of different tissues working together and enabling the organ to perform its functions. The stomach, for example, consists of glandular tissues which secrete digestive juices to digest food, and muscular tissue which causes the stomach to contract and mix the food well with the digestive juices, and connective tissue भी है, वो भी other tissues के साथ काम करे। एक एग्जाम्पल यहाँ लेते हैं, जैसे कि मैं लेता हूँ एक एग्जाम्पल कार्डियक सेल की। ठीक है, एक सीरीज बनाते हैं। कार्डियक सेल मिलके क्या बनाएगा? कौन सा टिश्यू? कार्डियक टिश्यू। कार्डियक टिश्यू कौन सा बनाएगा? कार्डियक से पता लगता है ऑर्गन जो ये बनाएगा वो होगा हार्ट। और हार्ट किस सिस्टम का हिस्सा है? सर्कुलेटरी सिस्टम का हिस्सा है। ठीक है, इसी तरह अगर और एग्जांपल लें, एपिथेलियल सेल के ले लेते हैं। एपिथेलियम सेल मेक्स एपिथेलियल टिश्यूज। ठीक है, और ये एपिथेलियल टिश्यू आपके पूरे डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम के अंदर होते हैं। एपिथेलियल टिश्यूज मिलके बना देंगे लेट्स से लिवर। ठीक है, और लिवर किस सिस्टम का हिस्सा है? डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम का। सो यू सी सेल, टिश्यू, ऑर्गन, सिस्टम। इसी तरह एक और आप एग्जांपल ले लो एपिथेलियल सेल की ही, वो भी आपके पास जाता है एपिथेलियम टिश्यू बनाता है, लेकिन वो अब एक ऑर्गन बना रहा है विच इज लंग्स। और लंग्स किस सिस्टम का हिस्सा है? रेस्पिरेटरी सिस्टम। तो दिस इज द होल सीरीज ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन दैट यू आर एक्चुअली सपोज टू रिमेंबर एज वेल। यहाँ पे आपको पूरी समरी दी हुई है दैट व्हाट आर डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइल्स, जिनकी डिटेल और जिनकी डेफिनेशन, जिनका फंक्शन आपको आपके पेपर के अंदर आना चाहिए है। एंड दैट इज ऑल फॉर टुडे। लेट मी शो यू वन मोर थिंग रिगार्डिंग द लेवल्स ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन। बाकी आप लोग देख भी लोगे खुद से।
Don't worry. अपनी लाइव लोकेशन शेयर करें automatically with your friends and family by adding them in which are both examples of eukaryotic cells, and then also our bacterial cells.
बैक्टीरियल सेल का आपको वीडियो के अंदर मिल जाएगा। बैक्टीरियल सेल की में बस कुछ फर्क याद रखने होते हैं आपको, कि जो बैक्टीरियल सेल की सेल वॉल है दैट इज मेड अप ऑफ पेप्टिडोग्लाइकन, प्लांट की सेल वॉल इज मेड अप ऑफ सेल्यूलोज। दूसरा कि बैक्टीरियल सेल के पास न्यूक्लियस नहीं होता, प्लांट सेल में न्यूक्लियस होता है। थर्ड डिफरेंस होता है बैक्टीरियल सेल के पास फ्लैजिलम होता है, प्लांट सेल्स के पास फ्लैजिलम नहीं होता है। ये तीन डिफरेंसेस आपके सिलेबस में। दूसरा न्यूक्लियस की लेबलिंग के अंदर यस बिल्कुल इंपॉर्टेंट है। न्यूक्लियस के अंदर यू शुड बी एबल टू लेबल न्यूक्लियोलस, उसके बाद न्यूक्लियर एनवेलप, उसके बाद न्यूक्लियोप्लाज्म और न्यूक्लियर पोर्स और क्रोमेटिन जो उसके अंदर फ्री लाइन थ्रेड्स होते हैं।
Which are prokaryotic cells.
When we talk about eukaryotes and prokaryotes, eukaryotes के अंदर plants भी आते हैं और animals भी आते हैं, और prokaryotes के अंदर you have bacteria as well.
So hopefully by the end of the video, you'll be able to label all the different parts of a cell and describe what each of them do. Let's start with what cells are. You can think of cells as the basic building blocks of life. And what we mean by this is that they're the smallest unit of life that can replicate independently. So if we took an animal or a plant cell, they could divide into 2 cells, then into 4 cells, and so on. In some cases though, like for bacteria, each individual cell is a whole organism. So when they divide like this, they're also reproducing, because every division produces a whole new organism. Animals and plants though are multicellular, which means that they contain loads of cells. And so when their cells divide like this, they're normally just growing or replacing dead cells. They're not normally making whole new organisms. To see what I mean, imagine we took a human and looked at him closely under a microscope. We'd see that he's made up of cells. So the skin contains skin cells, the blood contains blood cells, and so on. In total, we contain hundreds of different types of cells, and it's thought that an adult contains over 40 trillion cells altogether. Next, we need to look at the actual structure of cells. So we'll start by comparing an animal cell and a plant cell side by side to highlight their similarities and differences, and then we'll look at bacterial cells after. Now, to understand cell structure, we need to look at the different parts that make up the cell, and these are known as subcellular structures, or sometimes organelles. Firstly, both cells are surrounded by these cell membranes that control which substances can pass in and out of the cell. For example, they'll let some chemicals through the membrane, but not others. Both types also have a nucleus, which contains the genetic material or DNA of the cell, and so it effectively controls the activities of the cell as well. They're also both filled with a gel-like substance called cytoplasm. This is what all the other subcellular structures sit in, and it's also where the chemical reactions take place. You can basically think of it like water filling a water balloon, but the consistency is closer to jelly. Next, they also have lots of mitochondria, whose job is to provide the cells with the energy that they need to function. We'll cover how this works in another video, but basically they break down sugars, like glucose, in a process called aerobic respiration, which releases energy that the cell can use. And finally, both cell types also contain loads of ribosomes, which are the site of protein synthesis, which just means that it's where proteins are made. Now, all of these subcellular structures that we've just mentioned are common to both animal and plant cells. But importantly, plant cells also have a few extra structures. For one, they have a rigid cell wall around the entire cell that's made up of a material called cellulose. And because cellulose is really strong, the cell wall can provide support and structure to the cell, which is really important because if too much water entered the cell, then it would otherwise burst. Next, a lot of the cell is often taken up with this thing, called a permanent vacuole. You can think of this as a big sac that contains cell sap, which is basically a mixture of sugars, salts, and water that this cell can use when it needs to. And finally, they also have chloroplasts, which is where photosynthesis happens. We cover it in detail in another video, but basically photosynthesis is the process by which plants use energy from the sun to make sugars like glucose. And to help with this, chloroplasts contain a green substance called chlorophyll, which absorbs the light energy that's needed for photosynthesis. And it's this chlorophyll substance that makes plants' leaves green. The last thing we need to look at are bacterial cells. As we said earlier, bacteria are prokaryotes and consist of a single prokaryotic cell. This means we can refer to them as unicellular, which just means a one-cell organism. Just like the eukaryotic cells that we've seen so far, bacteria also have a cell membrane, a cell wall, ribosomes, and cytoplasm. Importantly though, they don't ever have mitochondria or chloroplasts, and they don't keep their genetic material in a nucleus. Instead, they have a single circular strand of DNA that's free to float around the cytoplasm, and that contains all the genes that they need to survive and reproduce. You might also see this labeled the circular chromosome, or nucleoid, but they all mean basically the same thing. It's just a big loop of DNA. Some bacteria also have additional small rings of DNA called plasmids. These carry extra genes like antibiotic resistance, which the bacteria don't need on a daily basis, but may sometimes come in handy. Some bacteria also have flagella. These are these thread-like structures that protrude out from the bacteria and are able to rotate to propel the bacteria along. So they basically allow the bacteria to move around. Anyway, that's everything for this video.
All right, that is all for your cell structure chapter.